We would say in the Lukumi Yoruba tradition, the ones that crowned me, my godmother, Iya Penny Oshungere Egbe Kunle Ibaye, and Omi Yinka Ibaye, Madrina Wana Manrinke Claudio. And also to those living whose shoulders and guidance and direction has enabled me to be where I am today. So I want to pay homage to my godmother in Pinado, Ia Alice Omilade, and to Ilari Oba, Baba William Ramos, and to Awo Felix Sanabria Oshe Bile. And I should also never, of course, forget my godfather Ifa, Ala Yemi Ifajoye Ojo Owo, Baba Fukunda. Again, I thank you for inviting me to be here today. I guess to say a little bit about who I am, in addition to all that I've shared, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, grandmother, and today, I guess, talking a little bit about my spiritual practices as a priestess in the Yoruba Lukumi tradition. And I am a priestess of Obatala. And Obatala is one of the Orisha, one of the many Orisha in the Yoruba pantheon. He is known as the father of the Orisha, and an Orisha that is associated with wisdom, with ethical behavior. He is the owner of all of our heads from the perspective of Yoruba people. So that's just a little bit about who I am. So I'll stop right there.
Oh, good.
And I'm also, I guess, a past president of the Association of Black Psychologists.
You took the words right out of my mouth. As am I, which oftentimes goes through the side. So happy you're here with us today because I think it's such an important thing. And I really love the way you introduced yourself, and acknowledging those who came before without whom you would not be. That is so powerful. And it's something we can all afford to do, I think, as we go through this lifetime. I had a question about Obatala, and you said he's the father of Orisha, and is said to be the owner of all our heads.
All heads.
All heads, even if we have a different Orisha identified as the owner.
Yes, actually, absolutely. He is the owner of all the heads. And it may not be some people may refer as a guardian, your particular guardian, but he is still considered the owner of all of the heads. And for the Yoruba, the Ori, the head, is the most important thing. And taking care of our head is extremely important for our health, for our well-being, and for our development.
Excellent. And what does it mean to be the owner of the head? What does that mean?
That it is his energy, essentially, that rules over our head. And his is the energy of ethical thinking, of reason, of wisdom, of morality. I mean, we associate these qualities with Obatala. And he is the one that we turn to help us to think clearly and to deal with issues that come up in relationship to what we would refer to as our Ori. That would be the Orisha that we would turn to. And so even though you may not be what we would refer to as a child of that particular Orisha, he's very important for everyone from the perspective of the Yoruba.
Excellent. And you said your tradition is Lukumi. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because Lukumi is certainly one of the Yoruba traditions that is very strong in the West. And can you share a little bit about Lukumi?
Right, yes. So Lukumi is, one of the aspects of the Yoruba spiritual practice, which was brought to Cuba by our enslaved African ancestors. And there were also other traditions that were brought to Cuba, but the power and the strength of the Yoruba tradition seemed to kind of rise up to have very significant influence in Cuba. And so the enslaved Africans who brought the Yoruba practices and traditions to Africa, spread it throughout Cuba, and they continue throughout until today to be very prominent. If you go to Cuba, they very openly pay homage to the Orisha like Yemoja, for example, or Yemaya. They very openly pay homage to the Orisha that's included in their folk music, in their dance, in their song. And Lukumi came to the US primarily through Cuba. And when Cubans kind of came to the United States, and it was through their arrival here in the United States that this tradition began to get reclaimed, basically, by African Americans. And in our interactions with Cubans, began to reclaim this tradition and to implement it here. And one of the things that I would say also in terms of the Lukumi practice, and there are many aspects of how people practice the Yoruba tradition. And we don't consider any of them wrong, but what we do say is that the reason why this tradition has had such a significant impact is that it is able to adapt. And so it is able to go to different places, and considering the energy, the dynamics, the resources that are there to adapt so that people are able to continue to practice the tenets and the traditions.
Excellent.
Is it able to adapt because its concepts contain something of what is universal? Is there a universality to? I mean, you spoke of Abatulu as the Orisha of ethical thinking and reason and morality, and those sound like traits that all people would want to incorporate, whether they see themselves as affiliated with, any particular religion or not.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you tap right into the reason why this tradition has been able to survive and be implemented in so many different places throughout the world, because actually you will find practitioners all over the world. And this recognition that nature, for example, has consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is something, it doesn't matter where you are. We may not have the same exact plants that exist in Yoruba land, but we have plants maybe that have similar kinds of energy. And the plants, of course, are what we refer to them as osine. Very important and fundamental in terms of the practice of the tradition, but they're everywhere. It doesn't matter where you live. We have, plants. We have water. That is everywhere. So these are things that are not limited to one particular area. And we recognize that they have consciousness, and that that we need to live in harmony and in balance with them. Perhaps maybe a way to say that.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. One of the is Santeria also associated with Cuban Yoruba tradition?
Yeah, Santeria is also another name that has been used. Some of us have kind of drifted away from using that. Santeria initially was thought as worship of the saints, but the saints, one of the things that was done in Cuba, and there are different interpretations of this, actually, I should say. And some people would say that in order to maintain the tradition, because of the dominance of Catholicism, we had to hide the Orisha behind the Catholic saints. And so we found Catholic saints that were comparable to the energies of the different Orisha, and we hid behind them. Now, others would have a different interpretation of that, and they would suggest that that was just a way for incorporating what existed, the practices that existed in Cuba, into the practices that the Yoruba and Lukumi engaged in. And that it wasn't that we were just worshiping the saints. We recognized that there was complementary energy or similar in energy, and that we were not making the Orishas subordinate to the saints.
So can you say a little bit more about what an Orisha is? I know you said quite a bit about Huberta. There are many Orisha. And what is an Orisha? Is there a language that we could use that would kind of capture?
Right. Basically, we're just talking about the forces of nature. And so that we're saying that, and the Yoruba actually would say that there are like 401 different Orisha. Now, they're typically we're only dealing with a pantheon of maybe about 9, 10, different main ones, but that the forces of nature, and the forces of nature, as I said before, that they have consciousness and they influence our affairs, and they're governing the universe, and that in order for us to have lives that are in harmony and in balance, that we need to be able to be in harmony with them, we need to appease them. And I should also say that very foundational to this is the appreciation of our ancestral lineage. And that is absolutely foundation, as it is in many traditions, African traditions, that everything begins with our ancestors. We wouldn't be here were it not for our ancestors. And so paying reverence to them, paying reverence to the Orisha and other spirits is considered to be a very fundamental part of the practice of people in this tradition, as well as in many African spiritual practices.
Excellent. Absolutely. I'm asking all the questions. I should give somebody else a chance.
Mama Huberta, I'm curious. So in you following that traditional African religious practice, what is there room for, I don't know how to say this like more eloquently, but like mixing and matching? Because I hear people who practice multiple religions, but then they bring in the rituals from different African traditional religions. So I'm curious, like, what the beliefs and what the practices, say about the mixing and matching of different practices.
Well, that is something that there has raised a lot of concern amongst many people, because it's like everything needs its space. And so the Yoruba, the practitioners, we don't proselytize. We don't suggest that there's only one way to do something. And I will often say that there are many roads to Timbuktu, not just one. And so, and each of those roads are may be beneficial in different ways for different people. Some people may be able to engage in certain kinds of practices, not necessarily Yoruba, and that's because that's who they are. That's a part of their destiny. While other people, that may or may not be in the best interest for them. One of the things that I've always appreciated about this practice is that it's very customized. So what is good for me may or may not be good for you. What is good for you may or may not be good for me. And so everyone has their own path, their own destiny. And there's a proverb that says, no person's path crosses another person's path. That, if we all just stayed on our path, we would not necessarily have conflicts. This is not about competition, but it's about recognizing whatever that destiny is and whatever the gifts that you have, and being able to develop those and to use those, not just for your benefit, but for the benefit of family, community, of the society that you happen to exist in. But mixing and matching can be very problematic because, it's you may be dealing with different energies. And if you don't understand those different energies, you could be creating a monster. It is so we would suggest not necessarily that it's wrong to do practice different systems. Um, for some people, that is a part of their destiny. We have priests who are uh, like me, leukemia. They may also be Palo. They may also be Vodun. Now that's a lot of different things, but what we would suggest is that all those things deserve to have their own space and should not be mixed together into, scrambled up in some kind of way.
So go ahead.
But are they really just different versions of the same thing? I mean, when you started out talking, you talked about the Orishas as representing the forces of nature. And the forces of nature are the forces of nature, whether you call them one by one name or another name. And so there should be some coherence to all of this, even though, people have developed off into different traditions and, maybe identify different representatives of those forces. Nature is nature.
Yeah, I would agree that nature is nature. And I don't know if I can say more about this in terms of why it is you would not mix these things together. Different people, different traditions have different ways, perhaps, of honoring these different forces. They may be similar, and they have their similarities, I should say, and they also have their differences, kind of thing. So, you really would probably have to know very deeply, understanding the reasons why a particular force of nature is revered in a particular way and in one tradition, and the reasons why a particular force of nature that you may see as very similar is revered in another way. And so most of us don't have that depth of knowledge and understanding. But, in terms of what I've been taught is the importance of actually being able to, as not saying that one is wrong or one is right, but recognizing that each needs its own space and its own energy and own space, I should say.
Last time we talked about uh, the Khan tradition and leukemia and other traditions. Are they religions or are they ways of life?
That's a good question. For the Yoruba, they're actually ways of life. So if you go to Yoruba land, in Nigeria, you're going to find people who may honor and pay homage to the Orisha, but they're Christian or they're Muslim. They do not consider this a religion. I think that's something that because of our ways of thinking in this society that has come about here, but it's not necessarily for them, it is a way of life. And so they'll honor the Orisha, but they still may be Christian. Now, there are also those Christians who believe that the Orisha and paying reverence to the ancestors is a form of devil worship. Because of the kind of information that they may be receiving from from their ministers and so forth. But there are those who still recognize this as a part of their culture, and they have many different celebrations to honor the Orisha throughout the year that people, regardless of their religion, will participate in.
We have
Within the-
we have a thought from the audience, and I think we've discussed this at different time points before, and would love to hear your perspective on it, Mama Huberta, and then anyone else who wants to jump in. Somebody asked if we can explain how the Europeans have demonized African thinking.
That's a good question. And actually, they've alienated us from our practices. They've made us feel as if paying reverence and venerating our ancestors is sacrilegious. They have denied the fact that nature is living, that it has consciousness. And so they consider what we do as fetishes. This is like a fetish religion because we may consider certain things in nature to be sacred. And I think when they alienate us from it, they've also contributed to us not being able to respect it the way that we should respect it. The reasons why I think nature is so abused is that we don't understand, at least many of us don't understand, that nature is living, that nature does have consciousness, and that nature is here to support us and to help us to live long, healthy, satisfying kinds of lives. But we see nature from too often from a Western perspective as just something that we can go and take and use for whatever purposes we so choose to use it for. And which is a part of, I think, the reasons why we're experiencing the challenges that we're experiencing now in terms of climate change and those kinds of things.
Excellent. One of the things that comes to mind is the realization that you talked about initially with Obatala being the owner of all heads or all consciousness, you might think, and coming as the representation of morality, of ethics, to the extent the captors of our ancestors have alienated us from that primal relationship, which comes to us from ancient Kemet Nubia as well, as Maat comes with the embodiment or the creation of Amun. So there's not ever been a separation in the wisdom tradition of African deep thought between being moral, being ethical, and being human. Our captors and their progeny, our ancestors' captors and their progeny, basically say our captors too, have never seen that relationship. Morality is not something that has been central to their cultural tradition or their way of life, at least based on values for harmony and balance and truth, those values.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the primary focus of the tradition is the development of good character. Ori Rere or Iwa Puele or Iwa Rere is one of the ways that we talk about that. And that, we have to constantly work on manifesting. I mean, that's, in terms of our humanity, that's like the highest form of our humanity is exhibited through the manifestation of good character. And that is something that hasn't really been emphasized, I think, in traditional Western philosophy.
Not at all.
I was thinking about, excuse me, I was thinking about the reading that you did for me, Mama Huberta, and how that has provided me with such relief, because oh my, after a while, like a while ago, I was having a lot of turmoil in my life, and I was like, what the hell is going on? Like, this is spiritual warfare. Like, there has to be something shaking in the cosmos. And so I reached out to Mama Huberta and I asked her for a reading. And so during that reading, three Orishas were identified as like over my head for that particular season, or during this season. It was Elegba, Oshun, and then Obatala. And in the reading, I got clarity that some of the things that I was experiencing was because like it was a part of my life path, and to bring out certain characteristics, like to further develop and nurture like my wisdom and things like that. And so hold on, my scholars keep interrupting me. I can't even have lunch. And so now when certain things happen that I know like my ancestors are warning me against, and I still do it anyway, I'm like, I know this is a lesson and I should have known better. Give me 1 second.
Yes, and just to kind of continue the point that Dr. Jonisha was raising, one of the things that the Yoruba would say is that, we don't consider there to be an ultimate good and an ultimate bad kind of thing. That, we have to always take into consideration the environment, the circumstances in which things are occurring. So there's not a just a strict, this is good and this is bad. That kind of polarity does not exist. And the Orisha can be both. What we would on this level might consider to be good or bad. There is a story that my husband likes to tell, and I'll just share it very briefly. And actually, I think this comes out of Chinese culture, but it illustrates the point very well. But in this story, this farmer finds a horse, and everybody comes to him and praises him and says, "Oh, you just have such wonderful luck. This is wonderful that you found this horse." And his response is, "We'll see." And then one day his son is out riding the horse. And while he's riding the horse, he falls off and he breaks his leg. And everybody comes back and said, "Oh, this was a bad thing that happened to you. You should never have had this horse." See what happened? And he said, "We'll see." And then the country breaks out in war. And they call up all the young men to go out and fight the war. But he can't go because his leg is broken. And they come to him and say, "Oh, wow, this is wonderful. Your son is not able to go to war. We'll see." So a lot of times we have an interpretation that we want to give to a particular event, but we want to say this is good. We want to say that it's bad, which may or may not be in the long run good or bad. And so very often we just have to wait and see.
Oh, I love that story. And it's really an important story for us now, being so very challenged in a social context that has named things as the best, success, excellence that aren't so good. And
Yes.
We're constantly pursuing something that may not be the best for us if we have a value for morality or character or nature, or the greater good of the whole. And
Yes.
So we're constantly put in a position to try to reason about that and master the lesson the so-called not so good has brought to us to grow and to develop. So that's a very powerful story.
That reminds me of the concept that we often pass around about diunital thinking, that things are
Absolutely.
not either or, they're not good or bad. They're usually both and, so most things that, exist in the universe have some aspect of goodness and some aspect that, could be seen as not goodness.
But the
Absolutely.
contingency is always perspective. Something's
Yes.
good because of the perspective you bring to it. So that for the Euro-Western people, it was good to kidnap millions of Africans and enslave them as cash chattel and bring them to the West to build their wealth and the wealth of their nation and the entire Western world. That was good. But was it? We'll
Right.
see. I think I like that response. We'll see. But there's so much. It's important for us to develop the power to reason. And also, I just want to bring up Elegba, or Eshu, as some would say. Can you talk a little bit about the role of Eshu in?
Yes, Alegba. Alegba is considered to be one of the most important of the Orisha. He is the one that communicates with everybody. He communicates with the other Orisha. He communicates with the ancestors. He communicates with the spirits. I mean, he is the one that will carry messages to the Orisha, or he may block those messages. Um, we consider him as the one that opens the doors or closes the doors for us, and we always pray to him that he will keep our doors and paths open, and the doors and paths of those that we love, and close the doors and paths of those who would do us or our loved ones harm. So that's a prayer that we may often say to him when we are about to embark on anything, leave the house, going on a journey. Excuse me. um, Anything that we're about to do. We go to a leg bub when I think I'm getting feedback.
We don't hear it.
Oh, okay. Anyway, we go to a leg bub.
Sorry, I do hear it a little bit, so I'll just mute Nana Linda and Baba Harvey, and then whenever you guys want to talk, you'll just have to unmute again.
Okay. But we go to a leg bub to help us to make choices, decisions in our lives, and so that we can travel down the path that's going to be in our best interests. But he's considered like the keeper of Ashe. Ashe are those special, unique abilities that we each have. Each of us has these abilities. As I said, he's a messenger. He is the one that's at the crossroads. You know, at the crossroads is where the threshold where we're making decisions and choices. Should I go right? Should I go left? Should I go forward? Should I go back? He is the one, and he can guide us to make decisions that are in our best interest or that will throw us off our path. And the reason for that might be not because, you know, from a Western perspective, sometimes he's been characterized as the devil, but that's not a belief that is a part of the Yoruba or Lukumi practice. But the reason for that is that he's trying to teach us a lesson. And so sometimes in teaching us a lesson, we go through challenges and difficult circumstances in order for us to learn something that we need to learn in order for our development, for our growth.
You're on mute, Nana Linda.
So it's all good, as the kids used to say. The idea that what's best, again, as we were just talking about, may not be what's really best and may throw us off our path depending on what we think our path is.
Mm-hmm.
The Euro-Western path is the path to materialistic gain and acquisition of objects and power over, and manipulating and controlling others. And I would doubt that Elegba would see that as the path in our best interest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in this social context, we've been socialized to believe it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then the path of throwing us off our path may indeed be that. Helping us stay on our path may be those hard lessons that
Mm-hmm.
are responsible for our growth and edification. So it's such a nuanced and deep pursuit of consciousness and understanding that really bypasses us with the Euro-Western cultural tradition.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, we believe that we have to be in communion with our ancestors, with the Orisha, and that they help us to have the harmony, to have the balance, to fulfill the destiny that we are here to fulfill. And in communion, I mean that we're not only in prayer, and we do believe in the power of prayer, that words have power. And we would say Ashe Lenu, the power of the word. And that, the things that we say can influence things in one direction or another direction. But we also believe that we need to often elevate those prayers. And we elevate those prayers through the offerings, through the sacrifices that we may make, so that those prayers can be actually received and manifested. And then we use things like divination, because when we're talking to the Orisha, when we're talking to our ancestors, and some people actually hear their voices, not everybody does, but through divination, you are able to get the responses back from them, whether or not this is the right direction or not, how you should proceed and whatever kinds of ventures or activities that you're undertaking. So those things become very important in terms of how we live our lives on a day-to-day basis. And they help us to be able to navigate all the various challenges, the obstacles, and things that we may be encountering in our lives.
I wanted to address a long comment that we have in from the audience, but first I wanted to say that there was another comment about the demonization of African systems of spirituality, and it brought to mind this quote. I don't know who said it, but I know I heard it and it stuck with me. And it was like that the white man stole your land and told you that in order to get to heaven, you would have to, live according to their ways to reach it, even though like for African or indigenous people, like our heaven can be right here on earth through our relationship to the land, tilling the land and being in harmony with nature. So I just wanted to bring forth that point of like this idea of missionary work, right? Like you said, Mama Huberta, they disconnected us from our roots, from our practices, and then they kind of shoved down, this idea of Western Christianity down our throats, so that we could be further disconnected. And then again, I was going to say that that also demonstrates like my whole journey towards learning more about Ifa and African spiritual systems, because I'm a Pisces, so I do identify as someone very spiritual, and I've tried Christianity and I've tried Buddhism, and I know like that those things do have merit and that they do support me and like during my human experience, but I also feel more connected to Ifa and being able to like venerate my ancestors. So I just love this conversation. And then there was a comment, it's really long, but I'm gonna try my best. If the task is to rescue and protect the African mind from the mania spread by the new orthodoxy, hope can be found in Sankofa. Interrogate the message revealed by the divine to the ancestor. Bookman Duddy, throw away the god of our oppressor. Ashe. The god of the first time, Karuthas, will guide us to become better humans in a Wahemi Mesu rebirth. Anger to anything else, including the God of the oppressor, will only continue to misguide us. Keep God's will as the focus, then focus on God's will. Or I guess that was a comment instead of a question.
Yes, I would agree. I mean, one of the things that I often, when I was, I'm now retired, but when I was teaching, I would talk about is the importance of us knowing who we are. And we might also say whose we are as well. And when we know who we are, then we'll be able to manifest that identity in the most authentic way. And the thing is that our experiences of being in the Ma'afa has definitely thrown us off track in terms of understanding and appreciating who we are, and has given us very derogatory kind of messages about what it means to be of African ancestry. And so many of us don't want to claim that. But if we're not claiming that, we're not claiming our strength, we're not claiming our power, we're not claiming our ability to be all that we can be.
I'll mute again, Nana Linda.
Yes, my question really has to do with the question of divination. So powerful and so important in our tradition. And I know in some Lukumi families, they have a priest or priestess who does a divination for the year so
Yes.
that people can anticipate and know what to expect. Are you allowed to share any of those messages with us in light of
Oh,
the
wow.
fact of what we've been going through?
Excuse me. Excuse me.
Ancestors saying no,
Mhm.
no sharing.
Maybe so. Maybe that's what they're saying. But first I would say, I would couch that in the ELA, we consider that a house site that I'm a part of. We do annual readings of the year for all those people that are part of that kind of thing. And so there are readings of the year that come out of Cuba. And actually, there's more than one. And there are readings of the year that come out of Yoruba land and other places throughout the country. There are readings of the year that come out for them. What I would suggest, though, is that the reading is, while there could be something that's kind of universal, usually it's much more applicable to those that are part of either that particular group or in that particular setting. So the things that will come up will be things that will, the things that you should do to be able to, be successful, to be healthy, given the environment that you happen to be in. Now, in some cases, there'll be things that will actually apply beyond the environment that you're actually living in, that may apply to a much broader segment of the world. But usually it is very specific in terms of its application to a particular group of people. Now, on the other hand, I would also say too, because there are very many different systems of divination, and so there has been a lot of incorporation of things like astrology into thinking about this, because the planets and their movements and the stars and all that, those are things that are going to impact everybody. And we don't deny the reality of that. In fact, in some houses, I should say, they will do an astrological reading too, looking at what is happening in terms of the different planets and the energies that those planets will be, sending out to us, and how they will affect us and impact us. So I guess I would say that, the readings of the year typically that will be done may be done for a particular group of people in a particular setting. But also, I would not deny the significance of astrological readings that look at what is happening universally in terms of the planets.
So you're not going to share any of the secrets today. Just
Oh.
kidding, just kidding. But we do want to
Yeah.
say this, speaking astrologically, we do know Wednesday, Pluto is entering the sign of Aquarius. Yay! Which is good news for all of us.
Yes, absolutely. And we don't see these things as separate, actually. All these things are connected. But, as I said earlier too, there are many different roads to Timbuktu. And so, astrology, I use a lot of numerology, in my readings, because all of these things are connected. And there's nothing that's really separate.
We do have a comment or a question from the audience, but I didn't know if Dr. Linder had a comment. I noticed you were trying to unmute for a while.
Oh, that's okay. It's old hat now. So
Okay.
let's move on.
All right. We do have a follow-up question. from a viewer who said, how do we navigate this, I guess, the demonization of African spiritual systems when pastors, bishops, and other religious figures will despise you all for these teachings when it's messing up their money?
Oh,
How we navigate it. Ah, that's a good question. You know, I go to places personally that I feel are going to be uh, welcoming, accepting, and I don't necessarily seek out those venues where people are going to be denigrating, my practices. Um, the obviously things like reading and studying ourselves is important because sometimes people are only going to take the messages that come from their pastor and run with it and not necessarily do any research or any investigation themselves. um, so, and sometimes, these things are in our families. Um, my family is not necessarily a practitioner of leukemia, Yoruba, African practices. And many of them don't necessarily believe what I believe. I'm still able to interact with them. One of the things that we don't do in this particular practice is to proselytize. We're not trying to bring people over to our way of thinking uh, and or practice, so that if what you are doing serves you and you're able to live a satisfying life, a healthy life, and that's working for you, fine, then do that. Because as I said, there are many different paths. We don't all have to be doing the same thing. It's not necessary for everybody to say, okay, now I'm going to become leukemia. Uh, that may or may not be your path. So I think, when you become clear about what is your path and um, you don't allow others, even if they have different perspectives, to make you feel ashamed or make you feel like something that you're doing is wrong, then you're able to kind of continue to kind of walk that particular path. And maybe, and sometimes even interact with people as long as they're not being disrespectful to you.
you spoke about having different paths. What is the penultimate? What is the path to? What's the ultimate goal? What are we trying to achieve in leukemia?
Well, we always say that everybody, when they come to Earth, they choose a head. Before they come, they choose their head, they choose their family. So we've made decisions and choices about who we want to, where we want to be, and what we want to do before we come to this particular plane. And we forget that in our journey here. And so what we have to do once we get here is begin to remember that or be reminded of that so that we can achieve whatever that agreement is that we said that we came here to do. What did we come here to do? Everybody came here to do something. You know, we say that there are no accidental kinds of births. Some people say I was an accident, or their parents might say you're an accident. No, not really. You weren't an accident. You chose to come through that door. And so one of the reasons why we use divination is to help us to become in tune with whatever that destiny that you selected is. And sometimes also we don't choose a good head. There are people who have chosen heads that are not really good heads. And even for those people, and we do believe in um, what did I want to say? Well, we do believe in predestination. We believe in that, but that there is a little room for modification. Sometimes if people have in their selection before coming to this particular plane, chosen a head that was really weak or problematic in some kind of way, that through their prayers, through their offerings, through their sacrifices, what we often refer to as ebo, that we might be able to improve that in some way. But the most important thing is learning to or becoming knowledgeable and aware of what your purpose is, and that everybody has a purpose. I think part of the challenges that we have with many people is that they feel like they don't have a purpose, or they don't know what their purpose is. And so they move from one thing to the other, from pillar to post, trying to identify whatever that is that they think is what it is that they should be doing in life. And our ancestors gave us tools to help us to be able to identify that. And if we were, if the practices were in place the way they were in Yoruba land, at birth, that would have been identified. They would have given, in the Yoruba tradition, we said they would have done what is called like an esentaye, shortly after the child was born, to give that child, the parents rather, the information that they need in terms of helping that child to manifest the qualities that they need to manifest on the path that they're on, to help the parents in terms of how they should raise them and how they should direct that particular child. Most of us, or many of us, probably the majority, are coming to this later in life. We're not necessarily coming to it as infants. And so we have to discover it along the way.
And you talk about head and choosing a good head and what a head is.
Okay. Well, there are different aspects of the head. The head is not just the physical head. It is, we have the inner head, and the apotiki, or the stories and things that are told, is that before we come to this particular plane, we have an opportunity to select from. We go into a room, and we have an opportunity to select which head we want, kind of thing. And for those who have done the proper offerings and sacrifices, they may be guided to a good head. For those who did not do those, they may not choose a head that is a good head. It may be a head that is, what can I say, a weak head, a head that is immoral in some kinds of ways, or problematic is probably the best way I could actually describe that. And so when they come to this particular plane, then they are dealing with the challenges that their ori, that's what we call the head, has the ori has brought with them, I guess I should say. And this is one of the things that we will often do, that we encourage people to do, is to do rituals with the ori, to take care of the head, because that's considered to be the most important thing in this tradition. If you don't have a head, nothing else works for you. And so there are ceremonies that you may do, there are prayers that we do in relationship to taking care of our head, so that our heads can guide us properly. And so, some of these ceremonies can be done by the person themselves. Sometimes the ceremonies are done by priests, but there are things that are done to ensure that our heads are clear, that our minds are clear, and that we're able to make good choices and good decisions in our life. I hope that helps.
So I'm thinking a head, I might be muted. Let's see. No, I'm not muted. Okay.
Oh, we
I'm
hear
thinking a
you.
head might be consciousness.
Yes, it is consciousness.
Okay.
It is consciousness. Um, I would say it is consciousness, and I'd probably say it's even more than that. It's conscious. It is consciousness, though.
Excellent, excellent. It's just so complex and nuanced. And I love these conversations because it gives us the opportunity to share with people another way of being in the world that has been demonized and that they may be fearful of, but has so much power and so much more wisdom. And one of the things that I interpreted you to say in terms of what the aspirational goal is, knowledge, wisdom, and understanding.
Mm-hmm. Ashe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. It looks like we're about out of time. Any comments that people would like to make or share?
I did have a question, but I do feel like we'll need another part because it could be a longer response. But when you mentioned the idea of predestination, but then with room for modification, I think about how there's other practices or spiritual teachings where people speak about like the concept of free will, one, and then also obedience to kind of what made me think of the obedience one is what you were saying, how parents or caregivers may be given like instructions on how to raise their children. So I'm curious about, there's this destiny that each of us have, but what is the, how do we kind of like, I don't know if the word is rectify, but how do we make sense of that with the concept of having free will, but then there's a way that we technically should be kind of obeying and moving in step with in order to be in harmony with nature and divinity and other human beings. I'm curious about that.
Right. Well, that kind of takes us back to the discussion about a leg bump, because it's about, we do have choices. And so, we're given the, as you said, the free will to make many different choices in our lives. Some of those choices are going to be in tune and in harmony with what I would say is our higher purpose, and some of them are not. But we still have the ability to do that. The other thing that I might say too is, for example, we have all of us have an expiration date. And that expiration date can't be modified in terms of, well, no, I shouldn't say it that way. The expiration date can't be exceeded. We can't go beyond that expiration date. But we may go before that expiration date, depending upon the choices and the decisions that we make in our life. And so to the degree that we're able to make choices and make decisions that are in tune with what our higher purpose and the divine plan for our life is, then that will more than likely facilitate us being able to live to the expiration date that we have decided before coming here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we make decisions that are contrary to that, then we might actually leave long before the time that we actually were contracted to stay here.
Meaning some people may expire before they have fulfilled their purpose?
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. Based on the decisions or the choices that they made in life. Because as you said, we have free will.
Thank you for answering that.
Well, we're so happy you joined us today, and I'm sure our audience is as well. And we'll have to have you back.
Thank you.
Thank you. Conversation.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Peace and blessings.
I think we might need to do a Q&A graphic on